Awesome. So, hi there, and welcome back to Still I Rise podcast. We are on episode 8, and I am delighted to have my friend Gerry Moran here, zooming in from Dublin, from sunny Dublin. Did I pronounce your name right, Gerry? Is it Gerry Moran or Gerry Moran?
Yeah, Morden or Moran. Yeah,
Moran,
doesn't
because in
matter.
the north we say Moran, but like some people,
Yeah, yeah. I know in
you know,
England as well, they say
do
Moran.
they?
Yeah, they
Do they?
do. Yeah, yeah.
So we met about a month ago. No, over a month ago. It was nearly 2 months ago, actually, in Dublin in the Epic Museum. We met on Mixed Race Irish Day, and I had a chat with you about your experience as a mixed race Irish man and your life, which was such an important part of Irish history, especially Black Irish history. And you told me about your documentary that you made that aired on RTE, which I haven't been able to access because we're colonized up here. But
Mhm.
so you were happy to come on and share a little bit about your story. So I suppose, yeah, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your story and your earliest memory?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no problem. My name is Gerry Morden, and I was brought up in the industrial schools of the time of the industrial era. I've been known as a child of the industrial era. But anyway, I spent 18 years in those places, which uh, wasn't very good, wasn't very nice. But I got through it anyway. But it was a hard time. Um,
What is an industrial school? Just for people who are maybe listening and they're not sure what that
yeah.
means. Could you explain that, Jerry?
Well, an industrial school is where the government puts children that are unreliable, or kids that, or the parents can't the parents can't manage their children. In my case, the reason why me and my brother were put into industrial school when we were so young was because it said mother without means. So that means she couldn't manage us. So that's more or less, kids that were down and out, and kids that were don't and being looked after properly. That's where we were put into industrial schools.
So, what's the difference between institution? So, there's a lot of talk now about the church and the mother and baby institutions.
Hmm.
What's the difference between then the industrial schools? Was that similar? Was it were they gendered? Like what was that like? What do you remember about it initially?
Well, about the industrial school I was in, well, the difference between the two is that the mother went in with the child into an industrial school. That's why it was called the mother and baby home, because the mother was actually there with them. The difference with me was I was put into an industrial school separate from the mother and baby home because the mother wasn't there. That that's the difference between the two. But besides that, there's no difference really.
It was ran by the church.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, the Catholic Church. Yeah, the Catholic Church. Yeah, ran it 100%. Yeah. So it was just called the mother and baby home because the mother was with the child. That's the only reason.
Do you remember going in?
No, I don't because I was only 5 months old.
Were you
My
five
brother was
months
one.
old when you went in?
Yeah, 5 months old. I was born on the 7th of February, 1960, and by June of that year, I was put into industrial school. I was 5 months old. Uh, yeah, no, I don't remember going in, but I got all the details of what happened. Um, we actually went through the courts, and the judge said on the records that these two children has to be put away, to be detained. That's the word he used, detained
Detained, that
as
language.
criminals at that age. I can laugh at it now, but it wasn't. It's far from funny then. Like to be detained, as criminals. But that was it, and that was the start of my life of hell in them places, as I call them, and that's what it was, 100%.
What's your earliest memory?
Pardon?
What's your
Memory.
earliest memory?
Oh, I'd say because you know when you're in them places, you don't realize where you are. Like you don't know. I'd imagine I've been about 6 or 7 maybe. So I would have been in there for about 7 years prior. Yeah, it's about that. Yeah, about 7 or 8. Yeah, about 7 or 8 years old. Yeah, but like even then, you still didn't know that you were in an industrial school because you're only a kid. You think you're at home or but yeah, but that was
And so in my head, I imagine I went to a convent school in the 90s,
hmm
right? So I
hmm
imagine those really old buildings as dark, as dusty, like from what I've seen about the industrial schools and the institutions, that it's like really old, dark,
mm.
dirty, like assembly halls of bunk beds. Like, what did it look like?
Yeah. Well, exactly that's right what you're saying because them places because to me as a kid the place looked 10 times bigger than it was. But you're right. They were like that. They had dormitories. They were called dormitories, and there was bunk beds in each cubicle as you're going along. So you could have 50 boys and 50 girls. We're not together. They'd be separate, but they'd be in separate dormitories. If you can understand what I mean. But yeah, it was like that. Yeah, like for a child like myself and the other kids that were there, it was a massive place. It really was. It was a frightening place. It really was. It was huge. Really was really old and dirty as you say it was. Yeah, it was like that. Yeah.
And was there routine for each year group, or were you all collectively doing the same things?
I think we were all collectively doing the same thing because most of the kids, I remember most of the age group kids would all stick together and the older ones would stick together and the middle of the road people age group would stick together as a group. But we like the basic everything was done, like we did everything together. You know what I mean? Like baths, and getting fed, if you want to call it that. But yeah, but that was routine every day for 18 years, never changed. And of course, because I was in a few schools, so the routine was the same, run by the Catholic Church, of course. Yeah.
And so, what did a typical day look like in an industrial school?
Well, a typical day, as far as I can remember, was you were called. We used to be locked in the dormitories, and the head nun would come in. She had a big bunch of keys, and she'd come in and open the door, and she didn't need to say get up. We just jump up over fear. That's what it was. Just pure fear it was. And then you go down and have your porridge or whatever that's you were getting because everything was mixed. It was all big. It was balls, say porridge. Like it was all mostly porridge every day. It was all in lumps, and you ate it because there's nothing else. You know what I mean? But then they went to school then, and then I mean, like we were in school, but we might as well not be in school because the teachers had no time for us. Nobody had no time for us at all. We were always put down in the back of the class, and we lost all interest in education and everything. We lost everything, and then we went back to the industrial school, and you might play in the yard till about 5 o'clock, and then bedtime. Then there'd be no food now from the time you got fed from the morning time to the next morning. Yeah, but like
And
yeah, but in a way, like it was, we had more times in the dormitories because we were free from all them, from the beatings and the abuse and all that. We used to make up our own little stories, and it was kind of a happy time in there. It might sound a bit
yeah,
odd, but it was. Yeah,
so it was a happy time in terms of like you had your people there, like you had friends, or what would have been family. Were you always with your brother?
my brother was with me because when I was sentenced, I call it sentence because to me I was sentenced in them places. Me and my brother were sentenced in 1960, and my mother went to America, and she came back from America in '69 to the industrial school I was in, Bahadreen Industrial School, and took my brother back to America and left me here for another 8 years, whatever it was in it. I could never understand that. I could never get my head around that, even now. When I found that out, it was like, why didn't she take the two? Took the two of us back to America, but she didn't. But it's just something I got to get over. But I never see my brother again. Once he left that time, I didn't really because even back then there were so many kids in that place. You didn't really. you didn't realize if you had a brother or you were related to somebody because there were so many of us. Um, but he went to America and I'd never seen him again, until I heard he died back in 2001 in America. So
And so,
that
do you
was
have any blood family in Ireland still?
not, no, not. Well, I have cousins because my mother came from Westport and Mayo,
Mhm.
and I know I have cousins and aunties in America, and I know I have uncles and aunts down in Westport. You know, I'll tell you a story now. It's kind of a funny story. It's funny in a way, but I found out that my auntie lived down in Westport. She passed away since, but so I decided one day to go down and visit her. Thinking that she might give me more information about my mother because I knew nothing about my mother. I knew nothing. I don't know what happened. Apparently she was quite wild when she was younger, but I don't know about it. So I said I'll drop down to Westport and visit her. So I walked in, I called to the house, and the lady next door says, "Oh, Amy's not in. She may be down in the bells. That's the pub." Right. So I'm thinking to myself, 10 in the morning? No, surely not. So, so I said, surely not. She couldn't be drinking at 10. I God, I said myself, put myself in for. But then I
Mm.
was thinking, then, maybe she works in the pub. Maybe she's a cleaner or something. Or she. But anyway, I went in and she was in there. So I walked in and I walked past her because I didn't know what she looked like, and she didn't know me. So I asked the barman. I said, "Is Amy Morton? That's the same name as me." Here, and she said, "Oh, there she's behind you." So I went over to her and I introduced myself. My name is Gerry Moran and I'm Mary Morton's son. And she looked at me and said, "What?" She said, "I never knew anything about you. Never existed." She never knew because apparently her sister was my mother, but her sister never actually told the family. They kept it a secret down there that I didn't exist. So to them, I didn't exist. But we got on very well, me and Amy. But she was my auntie. But yeah, but there was no, they kept that very quiet. It was like,
Mm.
they, didn't discuss it. Nobody knew nothing about it. So to me, to the family, then I didn't exist. So then when I
Did she
found
know
out,
your
then go on, yeah, did I
Did she
know?
know your brother existed?
Well, when I was in the school, I had a funny feeling I had a brother, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't 100%. Again, as I said, there was so many, there were so many kids that like people, because I know a lot of people that were in them places. I'm only finding out now after 60 and 70 years that I had a sister in the same school or they had a brother somewhere else. And they only meet, they're meeting up if they're still alive. But that's what they did. That's what they did around them. They separated families big time. Just out of pure spite. That's what it was. I'm convinced it was just pure spite that they separate people. But I didn't really realize until I got my freedom of information that
Yes.
that was my brother. I had no idea. But it was a
How does
sad
that
time,
feel? Yeah, how does that
Uh,
feel whenever you're given that information?
well, the thing is, it's kind of hard to describe it because um, you're in shock and then you're not, that kind of way because you lived with this hurting feeling all your life. It's not, it might sound a bit strange to get used to it. It's just kind of a shock that I never had the opportunity to talk to him or see him before he passed away. Because he passed away because he couldn't handle what happened to him. He's going to die, and that's what he did. Like a lot of kids did back then. But it was sad. I would love to get to know him, but I never would have known. But anyway, but yeah, but it's kind of a shock, and then again, it's not. You know,
And were the industrial schools abusive?
all the
There's a
war, yeah,
lot of, okay. Do you want
yeah.
to
I mean, there
talk
was,
a little bit about that or?
yeah. I mean, like, the thing, but like the thing was, especially it used to be, if you were a good looking young kid, you were abused, sexually abused big time. It was harrowing, and I was quite, not, I know I said praise no praise, but I was quite good looking when I was younger, and I got sexually abused a lot of times, and a lot of the kids did. They were picked out at random, but it was, it was a terrible. You know, it was a terrible thing. It really was. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. There was, you could. There's nothing you could do, and there was, even looking back on it now, it was very hard to understand how it's happening to you because you didn't know, and there was nobody you could turn. There's no one you could turn to, and then the physical abuse as well. I mean, that was 24/7.
Was it?
You know, yeah, I was, yeah, yeah, because in the different schools, at the schools I was in, I was in Moat, Balladrine, um, St. Michael's, St. John's. I was all over the place, but they're all the same. I mean, to me, they're all pedophiles. They were pedophiles. They were just sexually frustrated, and they knew, like, opportunity. The kids are there. Oh yeah, look, yeah. There's no one going to come in and say, if you touch my Johnny again, or if you do this, there'll be consequences in it. But they knew that and they played on it, and they abused people, or they abused kids. It was shocking. Yeah, it really was.
Was it priests and nuns that were abusers?
Yeah, it was a priest and nuns, mostly the
And
nuns.
nuns.
Yeah,
Nuns
like no, yeah,
sexual abuse by nuns?
sec- second, yeah, by nuns. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, they were frustrated. Like it really was. Yeah, and even like when I look back on it now, like even the nun that didn't abuse the kids, but the one that stood back and said nothing, she was as bad. You know that because it used to do that randomly. If a nun was nice to any of the kids, I'll tell you another story. There was a nun in Balladrine, a little small nun. Sister Mel was her name, and I've forgotten her. I used to call her Granny Mel, and she used to put me in the coal shed. She said, "Jerry, go in there," and she'd give me an apple and an orange, hiding away from the rest of them until I was caught one day. I was caught eating the apple and orange, and to get that back then in them places was a treat. It really was. It was like Christmas. But that went on for about, say, 6 weeks before I got caught. But the next day, they transferred that nun somewhere else. She was gone. She wasn't part of the crew. She wasn't part of the abuse that was going on because every single one of them were a part of it. But she was gone. I
Did,
never seen her again.
was she the only nice one?
Yeah, she was
Was
only
she
nice one.
nice?
Yeah.
Did she know about the abuse? Did she know,
Oh, she
like,
knew. Oh, yeah. Everybody knew what was happening in that place. Everybody knew what was happening behind them walls. But like, as I often said, when I meet up with other survivors, I always say, if only one person had stood up, and because people couldn't, people wouldn't stand up against the Catholic Church back then. That was, I mean, the power they had. I mean, they had more power than the government had. And because if someone stood up and said, "Oh, there's terrible things going on up in that place in the industrial school up there," people said, "Are you joking me? Them Northern Christian brothers are lovely. You would have got all this. Don't be so ridiculous. They would have just pushed it aside." But yeah, that's what really gets to me. If one person has stood up and had the guts to stand up and say, "Those poor children up there getting abused," and of course we had no one to turn to say, "Listen, this is happening to me. This is what's going on here." So
and I suppose you were one of the few mixed race Irish children in those institutions.
yeah, yeah.
What was that experience like at a time where it was like mid-century Ireland? What was that
Mm.
like?
Well, the thing was, like, yeah, as a young kid, to me, we were on the same boat. I didn't see color because I didn't know nothing about it until I got older, say 12, 13, 14. Like, because when we were transferred from Balladrine to Montcarmel Industrial School, um, we used to go on a walk on a Sunday. They used to walk us through the town, and we all wore red jumpers. So we used to call them outsiders, people outside. We used to call them outsiders. But we used to go for walks on a Sunday. But I remember distinctly that we walking from the industrial school maybe down to the end of the town and back. But people used to be shouting names at us, black, look at that black fella, and nigger and all this. And we'd be looking, what are they saying? Because we didn't know what it was. We didn't know what it was. They'd be abusing us, you know. Um, but I think they did that just for people just to shout abuse at us and give us more, um, yeah, punishment. But for years later, years later, I went back down to Mo, and I went into the pub for a drink, And I seen your man that was in there, one of them, I'd never forgotten him. And I said, remember me? I said, he was looking at me and he said, oh, I said, I'm not too sure. So I just punched him in the head. I said, remember that? I said, calling me names. I said, but that's just the way I was. I was just so angry with her. But that's what I
Yeah.
did. Yeah, that's what I did. So, the imam was saying he was sorry. Oh, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean it, just kids. And I said, yeah, but that's no excuse. I said, like, you abusing us. We get enough abuse up there without getting abuse from you guys outsiders. But that's the way it
Yeah.
was. So we didn't really know, like at a young age, about colored kids until later on in life. There was a few,
Yeah.
like there was a few in the school.
Mm.
Like in Balladrine, there would have been Yvonne and Carl Brennan. There would have been me, Stephen Dent, Mark O'Leary. Um, I think there was about the size of it. There wasn't many, but there was a few of us. There was a few kids involved in those places in the industrial schools. Yeah.
So, whenever you turn 18, do you leave? What
Oh
happens?
yeah. Well, what happens is normally what they do is they'll send a kid because if you ask any survivor, they're actually in the navy or they're in the army, right? Because it makes them look good. Look the way Jerry turned out. Look the way Johnny turned out. Look the way he turned out. Because of them, but they don't know what was happening behind the scenes. So most fellas that you'd meet, they'd be in the army or the navy. So they sent me to the navy. And of course, I'm thinking to myself, 18, um, I'm getting away from all this, and little did I know that that was only the beginning of my life outside, trying to survive, without that. But I thought my life was going to be was going to be great after that. It wasn't. But anyway, we went to the navy, and it was the same routine. Up, 3 times. It's time to get up, and I said, no, I'm not having this. So I was in the navy for 7 weeks, and I came back. I came back to Moat because that's all I knew. I knew nothing else. So they took me in there and they gave me my dinner. I got a bit of an old job down there. So I was there for about a year. But I mean, I was very disruptive, if you want to call it that. I was very bitter with myself and I was hating myself for what happened to me. And I was very angry with the whole system down there. And I used to get into an awful lot of trouble down there. So it was time to, it was time for me to get out because, so then I came to Dublin then and luckily there was a friend of mine that was in school with me living up here, so I stayed with him. But I was homeless in between, different places and all that. It was a terrible time, a terrible time it really was, because you knew nothing about, how to open a bank account, how to do this, you knew nothing about life, you knew nothing about women, you knew nothing about anything. And you were still living with that hurt that happened to you for almost 13 years, yeah. Like, in the system, because I was very bitter, I was bitter towards everything. I hated the whole system of what they did. Yeah, I
When did
was.
you realize, or did you always know that it was systemic failure and not just a Jerry thing or a personal story?
Well, what do you mean exactly? What do you mean exactly?
So I suppose whenever you're a children, you're a child, you're kind of you just kind of see it from your own lens. But actually this was the whole world. Like this was a corrupt system that was
Hmm.
running a corrupt country at the time.
Absolutely.
Like were you always aware of that? Or was there a point where you realized actually this is not the way, this is not just me as a survivor from a systemic failure, but it's actually
Mm.
the country it's designed
Yeah,
it's designed
yeah,
so that we can't succeed.
yeah. Well, I didn't really look at it like that, but I looked at it in a way. What happened to us? What happened to the kids? And what happened to me as a kid, as a child. You know what I mean? I didn't see beyond, the government, but I knew it was wrong as I was getting older. I knew there was something definitely wrong what they were doing, the kids, because even now, after all these years and years, I still, think of, those kids that were never seen again. I mean, I remember kids being there at night and then the next day never seen again. I still think of them. Whatever happened to them? Nobody knows. There was nothing said. There was no word about them because they could do that as well. But I never really thought about, the country. But I hate this country. I hate this country because that's why an awful lot of mixed race people live in England, because we hate the country for what they did. Um, because when Christine Buckley was still alive, God rest her, we had a big march in town, and you know, and had a big sign up, treasure all the little children of the world equally. That is, to me, that is absolutely a joke. It really is. But we had that like in a banner. But like when I think, I wouldn't even bother reading that proclamation. It's a joke. Treasure all the treasure all the little children of the world equally. God, where did they get that from? But yeah, but that was it. But but at the end of the day, they destroyed my life. They destroyed everything. They took everything away from me. Because when I had my family, my daughters, I couldn't do anything for them. I couldn't tell them a bedtime story. I couldn't help them with their homework. I couldn't read or write myself. I couldn't even do it. They took everything. Even from the grave. Where they are now, up to in hell anyway. But they took everything. They really did.
And so between getting out, being homeless, having
Mm.
children, what was that stage like? Because did
Well,
you
the
have a
thing was,
family of your own at some point?
uh, oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, when my first daughter was born, Sabrina, I was in the hospital. I'll never forget this. And up in, it wasn't the Combe, it was the other one. What's the name of that one? I
The
can't think
matter?
of it at the
No.
minute. No, 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 it's Maternity Hospital. One is the Combe, that's in Cork Street. The other one is, oh God, I pass it every day going to work. I can't
Yeah,
think
I
of it at
know
the
where you
minute.
mean. I know where you
It's
mean, and I think I was
Connor
born there.
Street. It's the big one. Jeez, what's the bleeding name of it?
What is it called? I'm going to look this up.
Oh God, I can't even think. I can't think. Uh,
A specific maternity hospital, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. There's only three in the city. There's a Coombe and there's one down in. Well, there was one down in. There was one in. Oh, what's the name of
Rotunda?
it? The Rotunda. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Rotunda Hospital. Yeah. But my first daughter was born in there, and I was walking up and down as you do uh, as a parent. And when the doctor came out and says, "You have a, you have you have a baby girl," he said, and I said to him, I said, "Thanks very much, doctor." I said, "That's one thing they won't take away from me." That's how it felt for me. That was mine. That was one thing that I wasn't going to take away from me. And the doctor's looking at me thinking, "What's wrong with him? Did he take something before before he came
Yeah,
in?"
yeah.
But I was just saying it to him, and he was looking at me saying, "What do you mean?" Well, he didn't ask me, but that was it. But I never forgot that.
Mm.
Yeah. So she's in her 40s now, nearly. But
Wow. So
she's
how do
lovely.
you
Yeah.
parent? How do you become a parent when you weren't parented? You didn't
Well,
experience love, you didn't
yeah,
experience
yeah,
security, all those basic human rights
yeah.
that every single child deserves. So
Well,
how
yeah,
can you parent when you didn't have that yourself?
yeah. Well, very difficult, I can tell you. I mean, I can say because I met a woman that was in Gordon Bridge, and I mean, she was the mother of my kids. So she's gone as well. She passed as well. But I met her, so I thought maybe if we got together, me and her, which we did, um, that would have worked out, but it didn't. It clashed big time because one day I'd go off and I'd be on the drink and I'd just be gone missing. And then she'd go on missing as well because it clashed between the two of us. But anyway, bringing the kids up, she was a very good mother, she was. But as I was saying earlier, my daughter said to me, "Dad, oh, read me a bedtime story." I couldn't do it. It meant nothing to me. Help me with my homework. No, your ma help me. I could because I couldn't do it. That was the hurtful thing. It was very, very difficult. It really was. It was very difficult it was very difficult to get you know to communicate with the kids when they're kids. And then it took me years and years. Even said to my daughter, "I love you," that, and give her a hug. And I just couldn't do it, and that killed me. Just but the kids never questioned me about where I was brought up. Never asked. The kids are curious about different things, but they never did. But I would have been willing to tell them. But I was, I was glad they didn't ask. But yeah, but those kind of things, like, simple things you take for granted now, bedtime story, but I couldn't do it, not because I didn't
And
want to do it, it's because I just couldn't do it. I didn't know where to start. Like, it didn't mean nothing to me. It was like, what, bedtime story. Where did that come from? Where did that
I
come
know,
from?
how would you know though? All of those things that you nearly take for granted as a child, like your
Mm,
health, your safety,
mm-hmm,
trust, hugs, verbal, like people telling you that people showing you and telling you that you care. Even in school, like I suppose a lot of kids now who do experience like abuse in the house or abuse somewhere, school
mm,
generally is a safe space for everyone or a
mm-hmm.
trusted space. But you're right, like then, how could you ever be expected to exist in a society that literally was designed to break you down? Like you weren't
Yeah.
even 6 months old and you were detained. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, I mean, it sounds like you've done amazing. Your children are still there around. They live in Dublin, do they?
Yeah, yeah, they do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My um, my eldest daughter now, she lives in Tala, and my middle daughter Rebecca, she lives in Tala as well, and then my youngest one, she lives up in City West.
Brilliant.
So yeah, she was. I actually delivered her at home in the house.
Oh, wow.
The youngest daughter, yeah,
Oh, my God.
yeah,
So
just in
you
the
did an
just in the right,
RTE. Oh, my
yeah,
God. So you're a midwife as well.
yeah, yeah. But I was just in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
But
Oh, my God. That's so scary.
yeah,
Um,
but like, you don't think about these things, but if it happens, you just go with it and
yeah.
just hope for the best. But she's
Yeah.
20, she's 29 now.
Wow. Do you think you're a
So yeah.
strong person?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because for me, because a lot of people often say to me, Jerry, there's no way I could have survived that. Yeah. But the reason why I'm strong is because I swore I wasn't going to lie down and die. Because every day they told me that I was no use, and this is why you're here. Your man didn't want you, your family didn't want you, all this. So I just woke up one day and I said, listen, I'm not going to let them win. I said, I'm going to survive for me, because I still live with that. My brother passing away as well. People I've known that grew up with are not here with us anymore because of that, because they just gave up. So that's the reason why I'm here. I did it for spite for them. I wasn't going to lay down and die, no way. Because I know for a fact there's more of this graves up in Glasnevin that survivors are put into. No crosses, no nothing, and didn't exist. And it breaks my heart, and I think of it. But that's the way it was. That's why I'm here today. That's why I can stand up and be counted now.
It's amazing. And when did the last industrial school close?
Ooh, good question, that. I think I'm only guessing now. I think it was around. I could be wrong now, but I think it was around the 80s, maybe mid 80s. I think. Yeah, but don't forget those industrial schools have been going since the 1800s, and every county in Ireland has one. Some
Yeah.
counties have two of them, but then you have the reformatory schools as well.
And so what were they?
The reformatory school was when you got to a certain age, say 15, 16. That was, they were preparing you to go to move on, join the army or join the navy, whatever it was in it. But if you were disruptive to them, because don't forget, you were getting bigger and they were getting older, so um, and then they started bringing lay people in. That's when the abuse. There was a lot of abuse, when they brought them in because they weren't got a vet. There was nothing. They were all sorts. I could tell you some stories about them, but there were people coming in off the street, saying I got experience. I'm working with children in their lives. And that was an escape. That was a playpen to abuse kids. Yeah, they were lay people. They were called because no one's wasn't able anymore to look after. They weren't able to abuse the kids anymore. Well, we weren't kids. We were getting bigger and stronger, and they couldn't handle that. So they brought these in, all sorts. Yeah.
And so what do you think about how the church has and handled support for survivors? You probably can't even call it that, but how
No.
accountable have the Catholic Church been with
Well,
industrial schools and the abuse that happened in them?
yeah. Well, to me, they haven't been. They didn't. They should be put. I mean, I should. As I always say, they should have been named and shamed. They should have been because I went to the to the tribunal when they were the order, of the school you were in, because it was all different orders. The Balladrine was the Daughters of Charity, and Mort was the Sisters of Charity, and then you had the Donegal Christian Brothers as well thrown in there. But I went to the tribunal. Every school I was in, not one of them admitted or apologized to us. And I sat there looking at them thinking, they even haven't got the decency now even to admit what they did and apologize to us. And they never did. And that'll live with me forever. That'll live with me until the day I die. That not one of them had a decency even then, even just to apologize to us, and admit what they did. Never did.
Would that have given you closure?
Oh, I would have, yeah, because
So
they gave us money. They gave us money from the redress thing just to shut us up. That's why I look at it. Okay, it was great because you had your family out, and you could do different things. But that's all they could do. But an apology would have made it for me. And it would have made it for an awful lot of survivors. An awful lot of survivors say that. An apology from them. Never got that. We got an apology from Betsy Ahern. I mean, that was a joke. On behalf of the people, we'd like to apologize what happened. But yeah, even getting the few bob as well, it was like, they were very reluctant to give to give us that. The government had to actually tell them, because don't forget they made millions of us working. That's why they're called industrial schools. We were working, for them 24/7, and then that's not including the adoptions and all the kids going to America and never seeing again, and getting big money. People, I often say to myself, people don't know. People that haven't got a clue half the things that they did. People know of different things, but they'll never know the real story. They'll never know the half of it.
are you still in contact with anyone who was in the industrial schools with you?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, like I see Jude, and the
Hmm.
most of Conrad.
Hmm.
Um, Here, when there's something going on, we meet up. But yeah, yeah, I still have contact, yeah, with a few of them. But then there's a lot of them that I've lost contact with. I haven't seen. And Stephen Dent used to be a good friend of mine. He be around the same age as me. I don't know what happened to him. Like I'd love to meet him and Mark O'Reilly and all them. But as I said, an awful lot of people, an awful lot of survivors, especially mixed race ones, went to England. An awful lot of the survivors went to England anyway. They just had to get out of this place, out of this country, because they just couldn't stand what this country did to them. Because we blame this country for, like we don't necessarily blame the Catholic Church, but we blame the whole country. People should have stood up. People knew what was going on in them places. But
That's Conrad's book behind me there. I
what's
didn't
that?
know that he was in it. That's Conrad's book. Do you remember?
Who?
I don't think you were there then. This is Conrad wrote this book.
Oh, the book. Yeah, yeah, I was there that day.
Yeah, you were. Were you there
Yeah,
for that part? It's
yeah,
so
I
class,
was.
and I wonder, like, do you think much has changed in our? I mean, there. It's not run by the church now,
No,
but do you think, in terms of what mixed race Irish kids now go through, in terms of identity, discrimination, racism,
yeah.
do you think
Well,
there's been progress?
I think there has because when you look at the population now and see all the mixed race kids, all the different nationalities now. Because back then mixed race kids stood out like a sore thumb. You could spot you could spot us a mile off. The few of us that were here, because I used to always say people didn't know me very well, but now nobody knows me because there's so many. You know, but like people, yeah, but yeah, but it had to change. But I mean, it had to change for the better because. But at the end of the day, for me and a lot of people that have been through that, we still live with that hurt. Like that'll never leave us. That, and as I said, if we got that apology from them, or even an admission, it would have been huge. Like all the money in the world wouldn't come close to it. But they never did. It just showed the mentality, even then. But yeah. But I mean, I seen people, survivors in tears, just sitting there, listening, expecting an apology from them, but never got grown men, crying, grown women crying their eyes out because they haven't got the decency even now to do that, because, as I said, all the money in the world will come close. Apology would be huge. I wouldn't give a damn if I never got a penny, or an admission, but I never got that.
And so, why did you do the RTE documentary then, Gerry?
Well, the thing was, I just felt, it was time for a survivor to stand up and be counted because, for me and for others, especially for the survivors, because an awful lot of survivors, live in limbo. They live, like in one room flats or one, bedroom, and they're afraid, they're ashamed to come out. So for me, it was like I needed them to know that they can stand up and be counted and they're as good as the next person. That's what it was for me. And because when RG said it to me, they said, Jerry, you're going to be out there. I said, I don't care. I mean, I'm a survivor. I know people are going to put me in, and say, I thought I knew you. I didn't realize you were in an industrial school. But I was prepared for all that. I was prepared for that. I knew that because when I did the documentary, told the story, I just said, survivors, we're not animals, we're treated like animals, but we're not. We need to stand up and be counted and say, listen, lift your head up high, because the amount of people that walk around with their heads down, you're ashamed, not anymore. But I knew that was the main basis for me to show other survivors that they can go out and enjoy life and they're as good as the next person. It didn't say because you were in an industrial school that you're a criminal, because that's what they made us out to be. But that was the idea of it. Because I'll tell you a little story. When I came back from the documentary from America, uh, I went into my local and everybody in the pub stood up and clapped. Yeah, and I just stood there and I said, come on, guys, give it over." But that was just out of respect, for what I'd done. And people were ringing me and people were writing to me, or people had my uh, address, or that knew, send me letters saying, "Thanks very much. Really appreciate what you've done. And I feel better now, and I can go out and and enjoy life without sitting in a room feeling sorry for myself." So that was the idea behind it all. Yeah, I do it all over again.
And
No
it
problem at
worked,
all.
obviously. Like, it
Oh, it
really
worked.
changed people's lives
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it did.
because
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Oh,
huge.
yeah. Because I was going through town about maybe 18 months ago. Because I live in town, I only live 5 minutes from O'Connell Street. But I was going through Moore Street, and I'm walking along, and I heard this voice saying, "Hey, Mary, is that your man that was on the telly?"
Oh, stop! You're famous.
I'm telling you,
Oh
so it was
wow.
like, so yes, yeah, so it was like, yeah, but for me, like to get a response like that, I wasn't expecting a response. Okay, I was hoping that people would respond to it, but it really was overwhelming for me. But it didn't, I don't want any, didn't want any brownie points for this. I did it for every survivor that, they didn't make, or even the ones that are still alive today and still fighting the system. I did it for them. It was nothing to do with me, where it was, but it was nothing to do, about me really. It was about other people. You have to stand up and say, listen, you're as good as the next person. You know, it's just a system put you in that system. That was it.
And what does it feel like now, Gerry? I don't know how old you are, but how does it
Mm.
feel? Do you feel hopeful for other kids that maybe are mixed race Irish who don't have parents or who are put in places where it is more challenging?
Well, I'd like to think that, for me personally, any child really, um, that's in care, that's what they call it now, care. But it's, it's, I don't, I don't like using that expression really care because it's not really care because we don't know what's happening behind them walls. We don't. Okay, that they haven't got the big industrial schools and the big dormitories anymore and all that malarkey. They have these places, but we still don't know. Like we watched a program there a couple of weeks ago about the elderly people who they were treated. It's terrible to see. Like we just don't know. I just hope for the best. Just hope that's not happening, and people are are vetted and people know, what they're doing. Because that's why they have the guard vetting thing now, before you get involved with kids. But still, it's just so easy to get around the likes of that. I'd like to think that the were, um, that they've been looked after, properly. But I mean, it was always a wish of mine. Maybe someday I might do it. To go into them places and talk to the kids talk to them about, about the experience, of what it was like for kids back in the industrial era.
Are there
You know.
any the church? So where or is there anywhere you could recommend that people could learn a little bit more about this?
Well, I mean, I think the learning itself, it comes from you. It comes from yourself. You have to be willing to stand up and willing to talk because it took me years. It took me years to talk about this. I could never talk about this for years, and I blocked it out because I didn't want to believe what happened. I knew what happened, but I didn't want to believe it myself. And then, of course, again, I believed I was a criminal. I deserved to, what I got. No child deserves that. But no, I think it's in the person itself to stand up. Because if I had kept going the way I was, I wouldn't be here today. I would have been well dead. I would have been gone for what? So I think it's the person to stand up, and I think it should be, especially in schools, people should be talking about what happened. It's like shoved under the carpet. But that's one thing. That's what I hope to do. I hope to stand up someday in the classroom and explain to kids, what's yeah, let them know what it was really like. Because 20 years ago, I couldn't do that. I couldn't even talk to anyone.
How did you get to a
Um,
place where you can talk about it?
well, like I got to a place because I knew I had to do something because I wasn't going anywhere. I was in an old prison for years, and most of the guys that were in school with me were in there because that's all they knew. That's what they were told, and that's where it ended up. I just think to myself one day, I just decided I just got to do something. I just got to stand up and do this. There's nothing to be ashamed of because we were ashamed. We were ashamed of everything. We blamed ourselves. We didn't blame them. We blamed ourselves, and we lived with the hurt. So I think it's it's better than in us to stand up yourself and do it because your next door neighbour doesn't know nothing about you. He might know you to see you and say hello. That'd be it. But he doesn't actually know you. But an awful lot of people got to know me because of the documentary. But I wasn't ashamed. I didn't give a monkey's me. I was just proud of what I did. People can take it, whatever way they want. That's where it was with me. I didn't have to do, but I would not be here today if I'd be gone as well. I'd be dead. I'd be just another number. So, and I
Are you
wasn't going to do.
proud that you did it all? Are you proud of all
Oh,
the work that you've
oh,
done?
oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I'm delighted I did it. Yeah, and I just hope it helps another survivor to come out of that lockup, as I put it. As Christine Buckley used to always call them places hellholes. She used to call them.
Yeah, and it's not far, like it's not like hundreds of years ago. It's so recent.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah. But I mean, whatever happens in my life now from now on in, it'll never leave you. That'll always live with me. All that abuse and all that would always live with me until the day I die. But the good thing about me was I learned to control it. I had to control it because if I couldn't, I was going to get myself into serious trouble, and I would have ended up public prison. Because a friend of mine was in school with me. He was in prison for murder. He was, but that was, like it can happen very easy. But he's out now. But he was in, I mean, he lost everything. But he used to talk about the system. The system did this to me. But like, there wasn't the system did it to him. It was it was him that did it to yourself. But that was his way. People have all different ways of coping with this. But as I said, you will never ever, it'll never leave me. I just learned to control it and live life to the
That's
best of
so
your ability.
admirable, isn't it?
That's
It
what it
really
is.
is.
That's just the way it is. You have to get up and stand up and be confident. That's just the way it is. You've nothing to be ashamed of.
So, what advice would you give someone now who sees injustice, who sees systemic oppression, abuse, failure? What can we do about it now? Because there are different types of this, maybe lighter
Mm.
now. What can we do?
Well, again, as I said, I mean, there's different things you can do. You can report it for one, to the authorities because there is what's the word I'm trying to think of? There is places like Tuslan, the likes of that. They have places where people can go to report these things. Even in my job as well, there's certain people, because there is kids in the kindergarten there where I work. Um, so we have to do all the gather vetting and all that thing. But I don't think it's very, very difficult really to stop abuse. You know what I mean? Like it happens everywhere. It's nearly impossible unless you actually see it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like it's very difficult to stop it because it happens all the time. It's just human nature. I know it shouldn't be, but it is. It's human nature. People just marry couples, people living together. It's sickening. But at the end of the day, it's just report it and just stand up and don't ignore it. Don't walk away from it and say, I'll do that tomorrow. No, it doesn't work. Tomorrow never comes.
That's it.
So that's
Well, Gerry, look, thank you so much for coming
yeah,
on. That is so, you're right. It's such an important thing that we need to
yeah,
talk about and know more about and explain to our Irish children as well. Um,
absolutely.
and I think, like, even when my son was in Dublin that day and talking to you and talking to Conrad, and then
Mm,
going back up in the train and just kind of thinking, like, my son's more Irish than me. Like, he's learning Irish and he's like
mhm.
really like, but talking to him about it in a way that was appropriate. And even he was like, why do people not talk about this? And it was like, well, Ireland's recent history is just, I think they just want it to disappear, and it's not
Like,
gonna, you know.
yeah, no, it's not. But there's another thing as well. People, people don't believe that all this happened. People believe that we all woke up one day and we decided, oh, let's get together and make up a story. People just don't accept that. They don't accept this because to them the Catholic Church, that's all that matters for them. That's all. They don't see beyond that. You know, that's where it is. That's why I see it. I see people just won't accept it. Oh no, the priest and the nuns couldn't. Oh, that post this, that look. Yeah, couldn't be doing that little timid thing like that. No, timid. Yeah, but yeah, that we were the timid ones. But
Yeah.
that's where people are. People, even years ago, I said to people, "Oh, no, Charlotte, no, it was lovely. She was in my house last week and with tea and cake, and like I said, yeah, I can show you the stars." I said, but anyway, but people are like that. This country, I don't think this country will ever accept.
No.
And even now, the day Betty Ahern apologized. It was like didn't mean nothing. Didn't mean nothing. On behalf of this country, we'd like to apologize for all the abuse you suffered. No, people, they need to stand up and
Yeah.
apologize.
It's too
That's
easy, isn't it, to do it that
that's
way?
absolutely, yeah, no doubt. And there's a few quids that just to go now. That's it. That's where it was because there's one thing with me that one thing that really hurts me is that two things really is that I never had the chance to get to know my brother, but and the other chance is I will never ever know ever. I will never know the feeling of Christmas. I will never know the feeling of waking up on Christmas morning and having that feeling of Santa and all that. I would never have that. I would never have that feeling because when I was living with my kids and they were younger, I'd be in watching my Poppins with some of them. My daughter said to me, "Dad, what's wrong with you?" I said, "Why? You're watching Mary Poppins or you're watching The Sound of Music or something." I said, "Well, I'm just living my childhood. I'm trying to get some of
Yeah.
it back." But yeah,
That's it.
that's what it was. Like, yeah, I would never have that feeling of waiting up on Christmas morning, never.
Yeah.
That's why Christmas is a sad time for me because I don't go anywhere at Christmas. I stay at home on my own. Um, my daughters don't understand about, I wouldn't go to the house of Christmas there, because I'm still living with that kind of, like in that sense, I'd rather be at home and just because not because I don't want to go to my family, of course I do, but I see them over the Christmas board. I'd rather just I'm be home on my own but that's what I miss badly as a kid growing up and waking up in the morning and be excited and all that.
Yeah, because
That's one
there's not
thing. That's one thing we
That
never
feeling's
have.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can
that's
imagine.
it.
Yeah, I can imagine, but
Oh, Jerry.
we would never have that feeling, never.
Yeah.
That's just something that's, yeah, you
That's
know.
hard to
Anyway,
accept, I imagine.
it is, yeah, it is. But like, it's you know, I often think about, you know, and even my kids, you know, when they were younger, you know, like I was with my missus at the time, and just looking at their faces and all, it was a great feeling. But it was kind of giving me, it was part of me that was there enjoying you know, getting the gifts and then fighting over that's mine, that's yours, and that's yeah.
Yeah,
But that's
that's
all
exactly
passing
it.
over. But that's the thing that you know, that we you know we really miss is that we never have that opportunity to, you know, okay, you can pretend to a point, you can, you know, watch the likes of my apartment, the likes of that. But my daughter be looking at him, what's wrong with
Yeah.
him? He's so funny. Why is he doing that?
Oh, yeah.
And he's really enjoying it. Like it's not as if,
Yeah.
you know, but that's just, yeah, it is. But that's
Yeah.
passing over. Important.
That's it.
That's
That's it.
yeah.
But look, thank you so much for
I no
sharing
problem.
this. And like your
No.
work is honestly so
Mm,
important. And you know, if there's anything, like I would love you to come up to the north and
mm-hmm.
share this. But as you and I know, like if I even mentioned this to any school, they'd be like, absolutely not. We need to bury that.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah, I know. I
your
know.
voice is so important.
Yeah.
And we're way more behind in the north. No one talks about this at all in the north. And there
Mm.
were industrial schools up here and there were
Oh, of
mother and
course.
baby homes up here. But I have
Yeah.
never spoken to anyone in the north who grew up in them. Whereas in the south, in the mixed race community, it's nearly
Mm.
everyone. Everyone above 50, I
Yeah. Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But look, I will put a link in the comments of the podcast to the RTE documentary. Anyone in the south will be able to
Right.
access it. I'm sure
Yeah.
there are ways and means you can in the north, but I haven't been able to do it legally. So
Yeah.
um,
Legally.
when I'm in the south, I'll definitely have a watch. But thank
Yeah.
you so
Yeah.
much for coming on.
Yeah.